Well, thank you everyone for joining our McAllen Society Power Lunch. Our power lunches all started at the pandemic. It used to be called Power Hours and kind of metamorphosed into power lunches. And what they're about is really educating our alumni and our St. John's community about financial and estate planning. And I'll tell you why, because I didn't introduce myself. If some of you may know me and some of you may not, I've been at St. John's for about 21 years already. My name is Susan Damiani, and I am the director of gift planning and also the director of the McAllen Society, who's hosting this webinar today. And the McAllen Society is our legacy society where our alumni and St. John's community can make planned gifts. That's deferred giving, which means including St. John's in their estate plans. And obviously, sometimes people don't know how to go about making a planned gift or even planning for their future. So my office is a great resource where we provide these wonderful experts that you're going to meet this afternoon. And they're mostly alumni experts that will share their talents and their gifts in financial and estate planning. We are devoting this time a little more towards athletics. Many of you, if you're part of the athletic program, you already support, and we hope you do support the athletic program. Right now, things have changed, and now we have the NIL. I know St. John's, everybody's been trying to figure out their priority points if you're a season ticket holder. And we will inform you on ways if you continue to support the program or want to support the program. This is a great way to do it. But first, you need to know how to do it, and you need to have a plan. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And then at the end of the program, I'm happy to introduce to you, we have Edward Cole, who's our Vice President and Director of Athletics, and he'll just talk a little bit about the priority points and about the status of our athletic program. So thank you, Ed Cole, for joining us this afternoon. So I want to get right to it because we have a lot of really good information to share with you. But first, let me just introduce you very briefly to who will be talking to you. And this will be more of a conversational discussion than more of a presentation. So first, we have Patricia Canal. She's a graduate 1985 from the school St. Vincent College. And also in 2011, she got her MLS. She specializes in assisting clients with homes being sold as part of an inheritance or trust. Her extensive experience encompasses all aspects of these complex transactions, ensuring seamless coordination and optimal outcome. So she's our expert on real estate. We have our moderator, Tanya Hobson Williams. She's a trust and estate attorney. She graduated 1989 from St. John's College. She's the principal of Hobson Williams PC with offices in Queens and Brooklyn, where she specializes in elder law and guardianship matters, including litigating real estate and landlord-tenant cases. She's a great resource. We're so happy that she will be moderating this discussion. She also not only receives a BA in government and politics from St. John's University, but she got her law degree from Benjamin N. Cardozo School of Law. We have another talented trust and estate attorney on this panel with us today. Her name is Phyllis Ann Polizzi Kalenka, and she graduated 1987 from St. John's College, and she also graduated 1990 from the School of Law. Some of you may say Kalenka. Is she related to the late, great Bob Kalenka? That is her cousin-in-law. I know many people will probably be asking that question, so yeah, there is a relation there. She began her legal career as an associate in the law office of Spelman and Walsh in 1990. And she is now working at, and I'm sorry, I don't have sorry, step in.
Spellman, Gibbons,
What's the name?
Polizzi,
I don't,
Trunkel,
it's not
Trentacott.
on
That's
your,
okay.
for some reason, it's not on the bio. What's the name of your law firm now?
Spellman, Gibbons, Polizzi, Trunkel, and Trentacott. It's a
All
success.
right, thank you. All right, thanks. I know it's a long name, so I didn't want to try to do it on my own.
Okay.
Not only did Phyllis Ann graduate magna cum laude with a Bachelor of Arts degree in government and politics as well, and English from St. John's, she was also the secretary of the Skull and Circle Honor Society. Our next expert is John Separano. He's CPA, CFP. He's a wealth manager and a principal of his own company. He provides investment and wealth management advice to high net worth families and individuals, particularly business owners. And our last expert is Patrick Kearns. He is not an alum. His wife is an alumna of the law school, St. John's Law School. He is fourth generation funeral director and president of Leo F. Kearns Funeral Home, which has 4 locations serving Queens and Long Island. He did graduate from the University of Notre Dame, which is very respectful, but he's not a St. John's alum. But we don't hold it against him because he's coming and he's taking time to help us, and obviously he has the connection with St. John's Law School through his wife. So I'm going to turn it over to Tanya, and we can start this wonderful conversation. Please bring your questions, because after the conversation, we'll turn it over to Q&A. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Susan, and thank you everyone for coming and spending time with us. We hope that you get some good information from this, and write your questions down. We'll have time for Q&A. So the first question that I have for the panelists are, is there any specific age that people should start thinking about estate or financial planning? Should they wait till they're about to retire? Should they be college age? Can anyone, answer that question for me?
Tanya, I'll chime in if you don't mind.
Sure.
So I think that anyone who's finished school and is starting their career, I think it's appropriate for anyone at that point in life forward to think about estate planning. And one of the things that most people don't think about is that if you don't put a plan in place, New York State has the laws of intestacy, which will control how your estate is disposed of in the event there is no plan in place. And those rules might be contrary to what you want. And those rules don't apply to allow you to provide for individuals who are not immediate family members. It doesn't. Those rules also do not help you satisfy or set aside amounts that you might want to dedicate for charitable purposes.
What if we're a young person, you're a young person, and you're just graduating from college and you don't have many assets? Should they also be thinking about estate planning at that point as well?
I think so also because estate planning also not only encompasses the possibility of using a will to direct the disposition of your assets after you've died, or a trust, which can also direct the disposition of assets when you die, and some trusts can also direct asset management while you're alive. But estate planning also encompasses other documents that are very important, such as a power of attorney, a healthcare proxy, and a statement of intent. And those documents allow someone else to make decisions for you regarding your finances and your healthcare in the event you are not able to do so for yourself. So I believe that they're very relevant for any individual at that age or older.
Okay, so you talked about wills and trusts. Just for the edification of our audience, can you just give us maybe the distinction between the two and maybe the pros and the cons?
Okay, so a will is a document that create to direct how your assets are going to be disposed upon your death. It is freely changeable and revocable during your lifetime as long as you are competent. It does not control anything until you have died, and the only assets that it will control when you die are those assets that you own in your individual name. Assets that you own jointly or payable to a designated beneficiary are not controlled by your will. So it's important when you create an estate plan to look at how you own all of your assets to coordinate how those assets are going to be controlled. Now, a trust is a written instrument which can also direct the disposition of your assets after you've died, but it can also be used as a mechanism to manage your assets while you're living. Trusts can be created under your will, or they can be created during lifetime to operate during lifetime. And trusts that are created to operate during lifetime can either be revocable or irrevocable, depending upon what goal you're trying to achieve. There are pluses and minuses to both. One of the major impediments to having your estate controlled by your last will and testament is that probate will be required in order for your executor to be formally appointed and have legal authority to administer your estate. And as a consequence of COVID, unfortunately, a lot of the courts have suffered significantly with loss of personnel, and processing times of probate have slowed down significantly since COVID. So more of my clients today are looking to use trusts, primarily revocable trusts, as an alternative or a mechanism to avoid the need for probate. One of the downsides of creating a trust is it involves more work, it involves more cost. A trust is only effective when it controls assets or when assets are payable to it. So when you create an estate plan which includes a trust, you not only create the trust document, but the second step in the process is funding that trust, either by transferring ownership of assets to the trust or naming the trust as a designated beneficiary.
Okay. How about if you have a married couple, let's say they live in Queens, they own a home,
Mhm.
and have considerable assets.
Mhm.
Maybe they have some investments, and maybe they are nearing retirement age. Would the estate planning for that individual differ from someone who's maybe just starting out? Let's say their assets are, including their home and everything, exceed, let's say, $8 million. Would you recommend a trust, a will? And how does that differ from what you would recommend to someone maybe with lower assets?
Okay, so some of the factors we have to take into account when we're creating an estate plan are the possibility of having beneficiaries, contingent beneficiaries, of being faced with paying estate tax. For federal estate tax purposes, every U.S. citizen in the United States, as of this year, has a federal estate tax exemption of $13,990,000. That means that amount of money can be passed by that individual to a beneficiary without the beneficiary or the estate having to pay federal estate tax. However, as New York State residents, we are also still subject to New York State estate tax, and the New York State estate tax exemption is much lower. It's only $7,160,000. So if you have a married couple with combined assets that exceed that $7,160,000, I would recommend that an estate plan would take into account either including within the will or revocable trust, if the couple prefers revocable trust, what is known as a disclaimer applicable exclusion trust to help minimize estate tax after both spouses have died. Now, an alternative to that is the possibility of naming a charity to receive any amount in excess of the New York State estate tax exemption amount. One of the problems with the New York State estate tax laws are that when your estate exceeds the exemption amount, which is currently $7,160,000, by more than 5%, your estate will fall off a fiscal cliff and lose the exemption amount. So when you're planning for individuals who, particularly a married couple, whose combined assets exceed that amount, it's important to look at the estate tax implications. Someone who's just starting out, who does not yet have that level of wealth, it's still important for that individual to make a plan to direct how they want those assets to be disposed of. That plan might not need to be as complex. It might not need to include a trust to minimize estate tax, but it's still important to include a plan so that that individual's goals can be accomplished, either to benefit a surviving spouse or benefit a minor child or disabled individual or a parent, or to benefit a charity. Without having an estate plan in place, that is not necessarily insured.
Okay, so in essence, someone who doesn't have that level of wealth, would they still be able to, as part of their estate plan, say, leave some money to St. John's, for example?
Absolutely, and there are a couple of different ways they could do that. They could leave an outright bequest in a will or under a trust, And that bequest would be fulfilled when the person dies, if it is created under a will or a trust that distributes it after they die. And their estate would be entitled to a charitable deduction for that to offset any potential estate tax. They could also create a scholarship during lifetime. They could fund it during lifetime, or they could fund it after death through their will or through their trust. For example, there's a general scholarship which can be awarded one time, which requires less money to fund, or there's an endowed scholarship that St. John's also offers. St. John's offers both, but endowed scholarship is one that can continue in perpetuity. When a person, for example, I'm funding an endowed scholarship in memory of my late husband, and I've created in my estate planning documents a provision that says that in the event I do not complete the funding before I die, my estate will be responsible for funding any balance. So scholarships and outright bequests are just two different examples. There are also many other mechanisms that can be used. St. John's offers a charitable gift annuity, which is a contract that an individual enters into with the university to donate assets to the university for the university to use for whatever purposes the donor specifies or the university deems necessary. In exchange for that donation, the university will pay an annuity stream of income to that individual for a fixed term or for their life expectancy. There are also charitable remainder trusts where an individual can create an irrevocable trust and transfer assets into that trust to ultimately generate a stream of income, possibly for that individual or other beneficiaries. But when that individual dies, whatever assets are owned by that trust will then benefit St. John's University for whatever
Nice.
purpose is designated.
Very nice. I didn't know that.
Mhm.
So John, I've gone to Phyllis Ann. I've gotten some estate planning in place. As a financial advisor and a CPA, what would you recommend to an individual, let's say, who has significant assets, $8 million, and they're looking to invest and maybe incorporate that financial plan into their estate plan?
Phyllis Ann covered so much stuff, so everybody's head's probably spinning and their pens can't go fast enough or they're typing or whatever it is. But just a couple of key points that I want to point out because Phyllis Ann and I and the other professionals on here collaborate. And you can't know everything for everybody, but if you're a really good professional in your lane, you should be aware of what the other people are doing in their lane so you know when to go to them and work with them with your clients. So that just takes time and a little bit of experience. What I found out through my own life is that when my kids started going to college, so we're talking about, and I don't want to get into ages, people who have children anywhere from whatever age it is, and their kids start going to school. What you don't realize is when they turn 18, you don't have the right to know their grades. You don't have the right to know any of their personal information. So I brought my three sons home. I'll never forget this. One was already turning 19. Then I had a 17. I had a 15-year-old at the time. And at Thanksgiving, when they came home for break, they did come home for mom's cooking. We basically lined them up and they all had wills set up for them. Okay. They didn't have much in assets, but they had whatever they had. But more important than that, they had to sign, which we didn't get a chance to talk about, but this brief, advance directives. They have to have somebody who will take care of their affairs if, God forbid, they get into a car accident or something when they're away. And you, as a parent, think you're always going to be their parent. From a legal standpoint, you are, but not from a rights standpoint. I'll let the attorneys talk to that. But basically, what we wound up doing is having the children sign a POA until they are married, and they can change who they want it to be. Typically, as a parent, to help them make healthcare decisions when they can't, or financial decisions when they can't, even if they don't have a lot of assets. So that was a turning point when I talked to an attorney about that. I was also on my third child when my cousin, who was an attorney in New York, said to me, Johnny, you probably need to update your will now for your third son. And she saw the deer in the headlights look and it's like, we have no money. What's the big deal? Well, I am telling you that having your affairs in order, no matter how much you have, will avoid all the things that Phil Sand said about probate and so forth. But more important, make it easier for the people you leave behind to carry through in your wishes and not let the state make those decisions for you, worst case. Terms of the question, and the other thing you could do is this, is if your assets are so large, there are things you can do during your life on top of some of the things that Phyllis Ann discussed, and then use it as a educational and a knowledge tool for your children, if that's who you're going to leave it to, is you can put money into donor advised funds as well. So donor advised funds, what's really interesting about them is that you put money into them typically when you have lump sums, is what we found out. And you get the benefit of the tax deduction when you have a large sum. In many cases, this is when people are have a big year, either commissions in a business that they're in, they get a big bonus, or they sell their business, or they have a big taxable event where they want to offset that. And if they're charitably inclined, they can put this money in there. It doesn't go to the charities immediately, but then creates this tax deduction immediately, and then you can give it to the charities of your choice over time. If you do not use it up, your heirs can then use it up, and it sets up a legacy of giving, whether it's to St. John's or otherwise. But in terms of setting up your financial plan, yes, we're working with the attorneys to make sure that they're staying underneath the exemption amounts. And what Phyllis brought up about New York is going to be different for different states. In the state of Florida, for example, there is no inheritance tax, there's no exemption, there's no estate tax other than federal. Everybody's got federal. So you do need to know the state you're in. You do need to know whether or not you want to avoid that or not, or going to stay there. So if you want to avoid that and you can't, and you don't want to be charitable inclined, and you don't want to pay a state tax, you may want to move to a state that doesn't have income tax, for example, Florida, Texas, and others. So it depends on, whether you like warm weather or not. But in terms of trying to plan ahead, a lot of this comes down to by the time somebody has accumulated $8 million, and this topic today is geared towards athletes, right? Or at least people who are a jock at one time, even if you never played pro, right? So the point of this is if you have children who are going to be exposed to NIL, this discussion is for the parents to make sure your kids get somebody who's experienced with these new laws that have just come out. And make
Can you
sure
just
they-
for
they're
the
protected.
group, can you tell us what NIL stands for?
Yeah, it's for name,
Image.
image, and licensing.
Right.
So up until now, professional athletes like let's use Michael Jordan because he was the one who started most of this at the pro level many years ago, like 30 years ago. There may have been others, but he was a pro. He did that. Now students, while they were going to college, for example, can get paid for that. It is opened up, and the state laws are different in each state. So you have to be aware of state laws. So you do need to get with an attorney who understands the state laws and a CPA who understands that and a financial advisor who understands it as well, because they have to coordinate these things. And investment should be put away and gone through that. So, but you talked about, Tanya, about already attaining $8 million. We'll probably talk later on about getting there, and which I've got a lot of ideas for athletes or people who are their second careers after being an athlete, their second career, whatever it is, because most athletes, depending on what sport you're talking about, are done by the time they're 30 years old. And either they got hurt, the new young and upcoming people are better than them, or whatever the story is. So if they've accumulated a lot of money right away, they need to be advised early on and work with the fiduciaries looking out for their best interests.
And what
Because you-
about if they're younger? Like you said, they're athletes or even adults who've graduated college and they're starting their first job. If they come to you, what type of advice would you be giving them?
Oh, you just opened up a can of worms there.
Uh-oh.
But I'll go down a quick laundry list.
We have a half
cheat
hour,
sheet.
John. Just kidding.
No, I know it's a cheat sheet, but if you're an athlete and you're making a lot of money all of a sudden, and you were just a college student just previously, or whether you get NIL money or you're about to have a new contract, number one is you have to seek out the right professionals who understand this area. Don't get somebody who does this on the side. Get somebody who does this routinely and is experienced. Make sure I do not sell anything, but you're going to probably need disability insurance. They used to years and years ago laugh at entertainers, same kind of thing, like dancers. They insured their legs. Well, now athletes are insuring their bodies, basically. Personal liability insurance. All of a sudden, you become a target for people to sue. You have to make sure you have high personal liability insurance. It is not expensive, but it is necessary. It could be 5, 10, 20, $50 million. It may only be anywhere from a couple of $1,000s to maybe $10,000. But when you're making millions of dollars, this is pennies on the dollars. So that if you are driving down the road, swerve to miss the stupid squirrel and hit somebody on the side of the street, you inhibited them from making money or taking away their wealth or
Right.
their ability to survive. So those are
Right.
very important things. And
So
then,
let me just interrupt you for 1 second because
sure.
I think that the majority of people, one of their biggest assets is typically their home for many people. So if you don't mind, just want to ask Patricia real quick,
Sure.
is real estate still a good investment? And given that with what the current interest rates are, can you just speak to that?
So real estate is, was, and for our foreseeable future, especially where we are, it still is a very good asset to have as part of your financial portfolio. The things that, with the current interest rates being what they are, the things that people have to be aware of is that it does affect purchase power. So when you meet with a real estate professional, one of the first things they'll ask you is if you have received a pre-approval, meaning that you've taken your financial information, you've gone to a lender, they've assessed that financial information and given you what your current purchase power is. And obviously, your purchase power is directly affected by the interest rate. Interest rates being higher, purchase power lowers, interest rates lower, purchase power gets higher. That doesn't mean you shouldn't purchase. That means you have to be more strategic about purchasing. And like the other professionals have mentioned, the best way to be strategic is to always involve yourself with a professional early on. It doesn't have to be when it's happening. It can happen in advance of that. So by the time you're ready, you understand what it is you need to do to leverage whatever is happening in the real estate market. But a real estate portfolio without an actual real property is kind of missing something, because the trajectory, if you look at real estate appreciation over the course of years, the trajectory is actually like this. And while the real estate market does do things like this, overall, when you see the line has increased. So it's really an important asset. And I wanted to just make a quick mention because, this is something about athletes, right? We'd like to give some important information to athletes. And I think that all the people around our young athletes should be helping them to understand and see themselves not only as income earners, but as owners and investors. And if you start that at a young age, where you help them to see that real estate actually can protect certain things like, um, you know, uh, investing in depreciating assets like luxury cars or, things like that, it will help you stay on the course of building a financial portfolio that is comprehensive. So I think it's really important that we start with young people. That doesn't mean as you get older that you can't do it, but our young people should be informed about this and start early because it will help them in their future.
Right, I agree. I think that that advice is good for athletes and for young people as well. So, what about an individual who's at the retirement age? Should they think about maybe selling their current home and maybe renting as opposed to remaining in the home? Is that usually something that people consider when they're about to retire? Maybe sell their home, take the money that they've accumulated in profit and keep that and then rent after?
So, of course, I mean, as part of the consultation, the advisement consultation, a real estate professional will sit down and discuss what your goals are. What are they now, and in your future? How do you see yourself, and where do you see yourself? So I'll give you an example. I had an older woman who was essentially forced, due to a change in medical status, to sell off her asset, her real property, her home, because she understood that she would more than likely outlive um, the whatever, she would not be able to afford her home, because her medical situation would put her in a position where she would need that money. And so renting was the option for her. She sold her property, she put that in an investment account where she could draw from it, and she rented a property that was completely downsized from her home, more according to her current needs and her current medical situation. Her mobility was impacted. And she did that for the purpose of knowing that even if she lived much longer than she might even have anticipated, she could still afford to live. But owning her home would have prevented her from doing that, because it was
Right.
too costly. So
Right.
there are occasions where that is a benefit, but for the most part, what happens is someone is selling off an asset like a home. They are usually downsizing. Often people move to areas that are less expensive so that they can purchase something that might be smaller than what they had before, but more affordable. Here in our communities, that becomes a little more difficult, because more than likely someone who owns their home outright or has a very low interest rate, if they sold now and went to buy another property, even though it would be much smaller, the cost of sustaining that property is probably much higher than their current home. So a lot of people then choose to create an environment within their own home, putting in ramps and things like that to make their current home more livable, as opposed to trading that asset for something else that would be more expensive.
Right. And I think also there's a trend where most people would prefer to age at home as opposed to going to a facility. And so those types of accommodations can also help with that.
Yes.
One of the things that I've heard people do when they have kids in college, sometimes I see them either rent a property near the campus so that the student can commute if they can't get on campus housing. And sometimes I've seen that they've even purchased either a home or a co-op or a condo. What do you think about that? What's your position on that?
So that's very interesting, and I've seen it done, or I've seen people consider that, my own family included. My brother-in-law and sister, when my niece and nephew were away at college, they had monies that some people are in a position where they need to spend certain amount of money, they need to spend that money. So one of the places they looked was to see if they could buy in an area near a college campus. And that's really a wonderful thing, but it does require that when you sit with a real estate professional, that you do your due diligence, because there are expenses that you may not consider, like property management, especially if you are not near the location. And I can tell you this from personal experience, that property management, finding a good property manager, is not always as easy as that may seem. And there are things that you have to consider about a property that happens when you are renting to young people in college communities, because the idea is you're trying to assess the value of the asset, right? What's the upside of buying? You have your child in school, you're not going to be paying rent, but what happens when they're not in school? Is this something that you can sell easily when you're ready to divest yourself of that asset? Is this something that you can rent easily? If you're renting, are you renting to college students? What monies are you setting aside for damage control? Because surely there is going to be some use effects on that property. And so you have to really think of it in terms of, are you entering into this as the as the business that it is? Because it really does become a business. You're trying to manage a particular asset, and you're more than likely going to need outside help, which you're going to have to pay for. So you really do need to evaluate it thoroughly, do a pro forma, figure out the value of the property, the expenses to run it, and if the bottom line makes sense to you.
Right, right.
Mm.
Very important considerations to make.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to ask Patrick a question that I asked the others. When is the right time to do funeral planning, burial arrangements? I mean, should families just wait until, the time comes for a loved one to make those arrangements, or are there things you can do in advance?
The most common time, at least here in New York, for people to prearrange, maybe set aside funds, is for like a Medicaid spend down. When they're in the position where they need to reduce their assets, so they can be approved for Medicaid assistance. That's probably the most common time that people will choose to prearrange in New York. One kind of interesting thing with that is the Medicaid law and New York State law allows you to prearrange and pre-fund funerals for family members as well. So if you were trying to do your own spend down and set aside, $15,000 for a funeral for yourself, that might not be enough of a spend down. You can also pre-fund funerals for other family members, which gives you the opportunity to drastically increase the amount of your spend down. So you can, at that time, also set up pre-funded funeral trusts for your children, for your parents, if that was the case, not usually, but other family members, you can set up pre-funded trusts to help with that spend down. And then the other time that is I think always helpful is for aging parents, aging family members, to at least initiate a conversation about their plans, what their wishes are, whether they like to be buried or cremated. Their veteran status might have an effect on it. But to at least start a conversation. So often families come into me with having no idea of what their parents or what their loved ones wanted. And that's always a very difficult thing for them. They always express the desire, I wish my parents had told me what what their wishes were. And so I think it's never too soon to kind of start that conversation. It doesn't have to be detailed. It doesn't have to be formal. An informal conversation with family members is very important, just to go over kind of what their wishes are. And it's never too soon for that. It's always a taboo subject. I always say my business card is the last one anyone wants. But they are important conversations to have.
Right. Can people designate someone to make funeral arrangements and disposition of
Yes,
remains?
yes. New York State has initiated a law a few years back. I think it's 40, I forget the number of the law, I'm sorry. But it allows you to appoint a funeral agent. And what that agent is someone that supersedes a family member in funeral decisions. The law was initially enacted for non-traditional families, whether they were uh, non-traditional marriages, people that may not have had access to medical and funeral arrangements. This law allowed an agent that you to appoint your non-traditional partner. You can appoint them to be your agent, and that would supersede maybe your parents or your children in making your funeral decisions. Some folks will use it also when they want to just ensure that their wishes are honored. Sometimes with fractured families, you may have specific wishes that may not be aligned with the rest of your family. Appointing an agent allows you to put someone in charge of those decisions that you know will follow your wishes. Um,
Okay. Do you see it used frequently?
Yes, yes. Especially, folks, it's very helpful if you don't have close family members. You might be living in New York, and your family might be on the other side of the country or even in another country. And uh, following your funeral wishes would be difficult for those family members. So you can appoint an agent that can handle that for them, make things a little easier on your family members. Having that agent, like I said, especially if you're living apart from other family members. Or a lot of cases, you don't have any close family members. If your closest living relative is a cousin does not share the same rights as a niece, a nephew, a grandchild, so even things like cremation. A cremation can only be authorized in New York State by a blood relative. You may not have a blood relative locally that can uh, approve that. So that gives you have the option. You can appoint an agent, and that agent can then authorize your cremation. Um, so, and then there's also a case too of uh, some folks who want a traditional funeral. They want a traditional Catholic funeral with a mass, but their children might not be still active members in the faith. They may not see the value in a Catholic funeral mass. So to ensure that you have the funeral that you wish, that you're brought to church for a mass, um, you can appoint an agent, and we've seen a lot of use of that of folks that they just for different reasons their children might not be active in the faith, and they want to just make sure that they receive the funeral mass, the Catholic funeral mass that they wish for. So they'll appoint an agent to be in charge of the funeral.
Do you see also people come to you and ask, how do they request that instead of flowers, maybe donations be made either, to a school or a charity? Do they come to you with those questions as well?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'd say most families will choose a charity that people can make donations to. And we'll put a direct link, things like, and most funeral homes will have a website where you can have a direct link so that people with one click can go right to the charity to make a donation. And it's probably one of the most common questions we get from visitors, people calling for information. They've heard about the funeral, they'll call the funeral home and ask, and not only for directions and hours, things like that, but probably the most common question is, did the family designate a charity that we can make a donation to? So we encourage families to do that, to pick a charity so that people can make that donation.
I know we don't have a lot of time left, and I want to make sure we have some time for questions. But because we touched upon this, Phyllis Ann, briefly, if you could just talk a little bit about a living will.
Power of attorney,
And,
healthcare proxy.
yes.
Okay. So three documents that are very important while you are alive, to help you while you are alive, are a power of attorney, healthcare proxy, and it's called a living will or statement of intent in New York. So the difference between the three is this: a power of attorney will allow you to appoint an agent to handle all non-health related, primarily financially related matters on your behalf if you cannot do so for yourself. So that power of attorney will allow someone to pay your bills, handle your finances, manage your real estate. Okay? A healthcare proxy and a living will or statement of intent are two documents that control your health care in the event you are not able to communicate your wishes and authorize directives on your own. A healthcare proxy in New York will allow you to appoint a primary agent and a secondary agent to make medical decisions about your care on your behalf. A living will or statement of intent in New York is the document that provides direction to your healthcare agents as to whether or not you, ordinarily it's phrased in terms of whether you would want to be kept alive by artificial means in the event of, for example, you're determined to be in a persistent vegetative state or a terminally ill condition where the administration of life-sustaining measures is merely going to prolong the moment of your death but not necessarily improve your condition. In New York, we don't have a statute that creates a living will document the way other states do. So in New York, the healthcare proxy is the primary document used and accepted by doctors and hospitals. And that document can be drafted broadly to indicate that your agents know your wishes about receipt of artificial means. The living will then would be documentary evidence that a court in New York would support to carry out the directives of your agent to fulfill your wishes in the event the agent encountered any difficulty in having those wishes or decisions honored.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for all. Does anyone have any specific questions for anyone on the panel? You can either put it in the chat or you can raise your hand. You can unmute yourself so we can identify you and get your question answered.
I have a question, Eddie, maybe because he comes across, a lot of these athletes, either past or present. What are you hearing that they're concerned about? Or let me put it this way, we'll play that you're the adult in the room that you're concerned about that they don't know.
Great question, John. I think what we are navigating and dealing with in the new world now of name, image, and likeness and the revenue share, which is now official based on the House settlement and the approval by the judge, that they are now paying student athletes. We're treating them like professional athletes, and we are now professional sports for that matter. We're seeing a lot of the student athletes already have agents or representation or have a lawyer that they are utilizing or, a so-called agent. And they're representing them, whether it's a family member, whether it's a former coach, so we're cautious of, trying to educate them on opportunities of how they are choosing these individuals to help represent them. We have the ability to provide pro bono law support from a law alum. We have the ability to provide pro bono CPA in terms of accounting. The IRS now ramifications will be issuing 1099s to all of our student athletes that we're now paying. So even though they're not employees, and we obviously are protective and monitoring the antitrust laws that the NCAA is trying to avoid, and their hopefulness that Congress will help get involved in this process. There are a lot of lawyers out there that obviously are going to take suit and making sure that we are managing things accordingly. And Title IX is going to be a big part of that as we navigate these. But our academic services group, our development team, our compliance office is doing a great job of educating student athletes on the ramifications of taking on a deal, how they represent themselves, how they present themselves, especially with social media, they are a brand, they are an entity, and how do we make sure that we're protecting them? How do we ensure that trying to save their dollars and we're providing them financial literacy? We've had a few alums from Jim Riley to Bob Adams to Alex Perez that have presented to our student athletes, and we're trying to make sure we're giving them as much literacy and support as possible. And it's a learning process for sure. But it's also hard to necessarily control when they are making some decisions in terms of who they are utilizing for advice and guidance, as well as, of course, their family support. So we're trying to make sure we provide them as much, education as possible because we're all trying to navigate these uncharted waters together.
Okay, thank you for that. I do have a question.
Oh, that was
Oh, is
Nick
this,
Mandikos.
I'm sorry?
I mean, that's Nick Mandikos has a question, but we were going to turn it over to you, Ed, anyway, since you've already been, answering one of the questions. Can you share some information now that everybody has heard from our wonderful experts? And thank you so much for taking time this afternoon. But if someone now has, a solid estate plan or financial plan, and now would like to support the athletic program, the men's basketball program. How would this equate with if they're a season ticket holder with priority points?
Yeah, thank you, Susan, and thank you
Mhm.
all for having me here. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. As some of you may remember, obviously, development's near and dear to my heart in terms of being the former leader of our development office, and I have a lot of respect and passion for all of you and the great work that you do and how important philanthropy is to our university and will be here moving forward. And for athletics, as I talked a little bit earlier, as we navigate these new times of revenue sharing, where we have the ability as a university to now pay student athletes directly, in terms of the term rev sharing, which is a challenging term because we don't necessarily have revenue that we are sharing, but it is more the ability now to generate opportunities, endorsement deals, and obviously provide them dollars pay to play for their services and our rights to now their name, image, and likeness as being a university student athlete. As of 2 weeks ago, now with the judge approval, we could all do that in-house in terms of the university. It was being done externally with NIL collectives and booster programs and alumni that were kind enough to run those programs outside of the university, but now we could do it within. And that allows us to accept gifts and provide the tax benefits and the generosity that we would provide all of our donors, whether they were given a scholarship to a brick and mortar project, to an annual fund, etc. And as part of Priority Points in preparation for this time, I was able to launch with our athletics department in January a reseat of our basketball seating locations, and what we call a Priority Points program, to provide points and benefits to our donors and our supporters that have given to us. So it's a lifetime giving program. So we give points for all their gifts, whether to athletics, whether to basketball, whether to law school, business school, any part of the university, they get points. It's a common program. A lot of our peers are doing that, whether it be UConn, Villanova, Marquette. So it's something we are trying to catch up with in terms of the times of how they leverage giving and philanthropy. And we also are honoring, in conjunction with Chris Vopel and his team, like Susan, the ability to honor pledges and estate gifts and any documented insurance plans, IRAs, etc. So this is a new kind of opportunity for us, and I know Nick Vendikos and his athletic development team have done a good job the last few months of collecting a lot of these documented gifts that we're allowed to give points to. And your estate planning is the same way. So the ability to leave us a gift or provide us generosity in some way, we could document that gift once it's signed and be able to give them points that they could utilize or reach the benefit of in terms of getting the better seats or the best seats possible right now at a men's basketball game, whether it be on campus or at Madison Square Garden. So it's a nice little incentive. To be honest with you, we're leveraging basically our best asset in terms of our basketball program. And, it's a desirable asset right now. Our team has a #1 recruiting class in the country. We're picked top 5 in the country heading into the next season with the Hall of Fame coach, Rick Pitino. So trying to really leverage and strike while the iron is hot, but also make sure that we are giving gratitude and thanks to our top donors for their incredible generosity, whether it be right now in the moment with cash or down the road or obviously post-life in terms of their estate planning opportunities. So I'm excited for this. There's been a lot of interest, a lot of questions, and obviously no one does it better than Susan, and it's great to be a part of this team here in terms of learning more. But I think it's a nice opportunity for either an individual or a family to take benefits if they have interest in athletics. And last thing I'd like to say in terms of the sales pitch for athletes, whether you are supportive or a former student athlete or competed at any level as a youth or in high school, our athletes really represent so much to our university. So first and foremost, besides what athletics means in terms of wins and losses, academically, our student athletes are the top in terms of our university of academic achievement. Average GPA for our student athletes is 3.6. 90% of our student athletes have a 3.0 and above. 70% have 3.5 and above in terms of GPA. 113 student athletes have a perfect 4.0 GPA. 5 student athletes were selected to the President's Society. So they're doing it in the classroom as well as in the playing surface. They are the most recruited students in terms of the job market. As you can imagine, them having the full-time responsibility of being a student athlete, going to practice, competitions, training, video. So they are such a well-rounded individual and true leaders. They really embody our alma mater more than you can even imagine, besides playing service. And of course, all of our student athletes are mandated to do service. So they're part of our Vincentian mission of doing it in the community and engaging those in need around the New York City area. And I always say this, and I can't forget this part. They really are the best aspect of school spirit and school pride for all of our current student body, all of our staff and our faculty, as well as a lightning rod for all of our alumni. Where else can 3,000 students engage besides commencement and graduation when they're done than at a basketball game, the opportunity to really engage what it's like to be a proud St. John's student or a St. John's alum. So I ask all of you, any way we could help you in terms of enticing alumni or speaking to the benefit of giving this way. I know there's a lot of comfort in giving in estate planning once you know your family's taken care of and life is over. And that makes total sense, especially in this crazy world that we're living in these days. So however, athletics can be a wonderful opportunity and menu item to help present that option for all of our student athletes who are doing it so incredibly well in all of our 17 sports. All of our 17 teams have student athletes that are 3.0 and above, and they're obviously successful in their playing surface. And we make sure we follow the mission of giving those first generation student athletes such an opportunity. We're very, very proud of what they do. And I guess I'd open up to any questions you have for me.
I actually do have a question, Ed. Do you mind?
That has, okay.
So Ed, so interesting with this ability for your student athletes to pay to play. Are they in a position that at the 4-year mark where they have amassed a level of wealth that they really do need to identify, whether something to invest in, and professionals who can help them with things like their tax implications and trusts and wills and stuff like that?
Yeah, Patricia, it's something that's a great question. So right now, our rev share model is focused on men's and women's basketball in terms of the revenue generating sports. And other sports and varsity teams have the ability that we still can provide them gifts depending on alumni activity or corporate interest levels. We have an open marketplace on Open Doors where any company can go to identify one of our student athletes. But it's a great question. It's something I'm open to always expanding on. I think our development and academic team does a really good job of financial literacy. As I said earlier, we have a bunch of alums who have donated their time on financial planning, whether that be Jim Riley, Bob Adams, Alex Perez, Morgan Stanley and Fidelity and groups like that have helped offer those services. We have the ability to provide pro bono services, Patricia, in terms of legal or CPA. And as I said earlier, we're issuing 1099s for these student athletes. So it's something that's a little bit of a learning process for all of us as we engage them. But yeah, we want to be able to share with them as much education and opportunity to help them. Coach Pitino has been very outspoken from a basketball perspective that this is probably the opportunity where this might be the most money these students ever make is right now in their college days. Scary thought, right? So how do we make sure we are arming them and preparing them for life after? And there's a lot of wonderful ideas out there in terms of pension plans and putting money into retirement funds. Hopefully,
and real estate, Ed.
Yeah, and real estate.
And real estate. I don't even mean that as a self-plug, but it is a really important piece of the financial puzzle. And if they're going to be in a position where they could parlay whatever they earn into a powerful asset that could over time actually put them in a different, it changes things.
Patricia, right now they are not employees, and that's a big, obviously, political debate, and we'll see what Congress stands on that, or the new administration will stand on that. But in many ways, too bad they're not, because between the benefits or retirement funds or the ability to actually collectively bargain or unionize for the employees, it would help them to even establish those kind of programs. So we'll see how we monitor that moving forward. But I love the idea of educating them more. If you offer some of those services, we definitely
I do.
pick you up on those opportunities. But
Yep.
it's really a sensitive time. We want to make sure that we are empowering and educating our student athletes as much as possible during this interesting, weird and kind of unique time for us.
Yeah, for
Yes.
extended, any of the panelists here would probably be able to help out in any way they can because we've got all different skill sets that we work with. I work with ex-NFL players at their second career. I'm working with them now after they made their seed money. And what I would suggest is to diversify slowly as your knowledge builds. Do not rush into anything. Understand what your career span could be, short, and plan accordingly. That's where I see the biggest mistakes made with the younger people and athletes because they've had money dumped in their laps that they couldn't even imagine. And they don't have the skill set to know how to do it, no matter how much you tell them. So, in many cases, the parents need to be there as well with them if they're in the picture. That's the hard part.
Yeah,
Right.
good advice, John. I think, as you said earlier, whether it be injury or play stops at some point, how do we make sure we are educating not only the student athlete or the professional athlete here at some point, or their family in terms of opportunities and education there is education is truly really important. And I think we just try to continue to share as much information as possible. I know when the athlete is in the midst of their career or their aspirations of going professional from college, I know it's always hard to think it's ever going to end, or it will end. I think how do we continue to make sure we are giving them examples and maybe even bringing back some of our former professional student athletes who have played in the pros, and that their perspective of when it did end and their experience financially might be something we look into as well. I think that'd be a valuable tool.
Right. And also, as was pointed out, advanced directives for young people are very important because even though they may be young and healthy, you never know what could happen. And you want to make sure that there's someone in place to make those decisions for them.
Good point. Well, we're 2 minutes over 1 o'clock. I don't know if anyone else has any other questions, but certainly could email me and I can forward those questions to our experts. You will get a follow-up email that will provide the recording. We'll also provide the detailed bios on each expert and contact information if you'd like to follow up with them individually. Ed, I know you're very busy and I really appreciate you coming on the call and really explaining all of this because I know I'm getting questions all the time about it. I have been working on some gifts, which has been great. Not only can you make a plan gift, but like Ed was saying, and I know some of our experts have mentioned about endowed funds and so forth, sometimes people make what we call a blended gift where they may give now, make a pledge to eventually establish an endowed fund, but also use that fund and include it in their estate plans, like I think Phyllis Ann, you mentioned. And there's so much more different types of plan gifts. And as you can see, which I hope you saw from this conversation, a plan gift has lots of benefits, not only a benefit of being charitable and giving to the university, but also a benefit to you and your family, to your beneficiaries. And obviously what we were showing with athletes, protecting their assets and making sure if, that time when they no longer can play, they have their plans in place and something that's going to support them and help them beyond their years of play. So hopefully you were well informed today. But like I said, if you have any questions, I'm always here to answer any questions you may have and to forward them on to our experts as well. And thank you again to all the experts. Tanya, you were wonderful at moderating this. We really appreciate it. And power lunches don't end just today. We do offer them during the course of the year, and we do drill down on certain topics. So today was more general, but we certainly have, power lunches on wills and trusts and on insurance policies and retirement accounts. So once now that you're on, we will send you this information moving forward. And the benefit to making also a gift to the university through the athletic program, you become a member of the Red and White Club, which is a great St. John's community. And also, if you make a planned gift to become part of the McCown Society community. And it is a really strong community, a great membership, and we do offer so many different types of activities. I mean, Phyllis Ann and Tanya are part of our Pickleball Johnnies. We play pickleball on campus. So there's so many things beyond making this gift to the university that I think you'll get so much more in return. So thank you all for your time and for signing on. We really appreciate it. And have a great afternoon.